Thank you, Aaron. Now, the government today has appeared to give the green light for Antifa Yobs to confront anti-asylum hotel protesters. The Farnham Borden Labour group shared a flyer for a planned Stand Up to Racism counter-protest in Aldershot this afternoon, calling on activists to, quote, stop the far right. Now, a Labour spokesperson has told GB News this. Our governments could be not clearer in the action we're taking to tackle illegal migration or our clear commitments to end the use of asylum hotels. And just this week, we have announced a further £100 million of investment in our border security, supporting up to 300 new National Crime Agency officers. But here's the point. They directly refuse to condemn the use of the word, the quote, far right, or indeed the encouragement of outsiders attending today's counter-protests. Why? Well, join me now as GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. We're hours away now from those crowds amassing in Aldershot. Locals, the pink protest, they say it's about women's safety, it's about rising crime. Outsiders from Stand Up to Racism once again are being shipped in, mostly from London, and the locals aren't happy. We've given the Labour Party themselves and the local MP ample opportunity to tell those people to stay away. Mark White, they would not do that. The big question is, why not?
Well, they say, of course, they want to facilitate everyone's right to peaceful protest. But the fact is, these self-styled anti-fascist protesters, the counter-protesters, the whole way in which they operate is to turn up the temperature by screaming at the opposing protesters and calling them Nazis and racist scum and alike. So their sort of involvement in any of these protest events is never a constructive process, and it always does just turn up the heat. And so there's real concern, I think, that the police have. I think it's also concerning that Hampshire Police could not give a firm commitment that they would tell and instruct those, and they have the powers to do that, covering their faces, to uncover their faces, because that clearly can be intimidating for anyone turning up at a protest to see an opposing group with their faces covered, as we often see with these Antifa marches. The Aldershot protest itself is being modelled on the peaceful protest that we saw outside the Britannia Hotel at Canary Wharf over the weekend, where you saw mothers all dressed in pink with their children and other supporters there. For the most part, throughout the day, there was a group of masked individuals that turned up later in the day. We don't know exactly which particular affiliation they were aligned to. I think there was a small number of arrests related to that, but certainly that protest by mothers and supporters with their children was very peaceful, and it was about trying to get the message across that there is real concern about the elevated levels of criminality that we're now seeing associated with these migrant hotels up and down the country, and some really high-profile events, some of which are going through the courts and we can't really talk about, but that have brought people out onto the streets to protest, to say they don't want these migrant hotels in their neighbourhood. So that's how the Aldershot protest want to facilitate the event this afternoon. They want it to be peaceful, but every time you get these counter-protesters, you never know just how things might turn out, Martin.
Do you want to save a boatload of cash this summer, wherever you have a trip planned? The one thing you're going to need is access to the internet and on the go. And you can do that easily with Saily. Hit the link in the description to get 15% of your first eSIM plan ready for your trip, so you can browse to your heart's content. Saily gets you a local SIM card you can use when traveling, so you don't have to pay those crazy roaming fees just to send a message or check the latest news. Now, they've got plans in over 160 countries, 8 regions, so pretty much everywhere Wherever you're going, they'll be able to make sure you're connected. So how does it work? All you've got to do is this. Hit the link in the description to download the app. It will work on iOS or Android. Buy a plan. You can choose an amount of data and time frame that suits you best. And then just install the eSIM on your phone. When you land at your holiday destination, you can activate your plan instantly. And if that wasn't enough, Saily eSIMs only ever have to be installed once. So when you go on your next trip, you just buy a plan for a new country, turn that eSIM back on, and boom, you're back watching me on GB News. I'll be using a Saily SIM on my next holiday because it's actually faster than some of the hotel Wi-Fis. You can get unlimited data if you want, so you can scroll away to your heart's content. And when you leave the hotel, you don't have to do that annoying thing of Wi-Fi hopping because you've got constant connectivity wherever you go. And they've got 24/7 support as well, and a full refund policy if your eSIM isn't compatible. So get sorted for your next trip. Download Saily using the link in the description below. And if you use the code NEWS at checkout, you'll get an exclusive 15% discount on us. So click the link, download Saily, and use the code NEWS at checkout.
And Mark White, I've been speaking to locals, the organisers of this protest earlier on, and they asked local police in Hampshire if they could implement a so-called Section 60AA order. This bans face coverings in public. They wanted that in place because they're very clear they themselves won't be wearing masks. It's a peaceful protest. They wanted the outsiders to have their masks removed by police. The local police have said they respect people's concerns, but they don't think that the threshold has been breached. And Mark, I put it to you again that could appear to be antagonistic. And you can bet your bottom dollar, Mark, if they turn up at the station, we may see scenes like we saw in Epping, where the police are escorting them, marching them in. Aldershot's a military town. Is it really the sensible use of deployment to allow this to happen, Mark White?
Yes, I mean, it's a nonsense, really, to have people turning up at a protest with their faces covered. We're not in a COVID emergency anymore. There is no good reason for anyone to be out in public hiding their identity like this, unless specifically they don't want to be identified because they're going to be up to no good. So there's clear concern that people taking to a march like this and a protest like this and then covering up their face might well be involved in some kind of criminality. So the police certainly have the powers to do that. They did it with the Epping protest just recently, you'll remember. They do it pretty regularly in London. And I should say, with regard to London, Martin, it's not just protests that we're seeing in Aldershot today. There's a number around the country and in London, two in particular, that the police will be out in force at, again at the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf and also at the Thistle City Hotel in Islington. And the Metropolitan Police say they have actually called on mutual aid. So there will be police forces from other parts of the country heading to the capital to assist their colleagues from the Metropolitan Police because they are preparing for a weekend of significant protests that are not just to do with migrant hotels, but also Palestine Action type protests as well in support of Palestine and anti-Israel gatherings as well.
And Mark, I'm just hearing at that precise point in Bournemouth tomorrow there's a protest, and the police have just said that there'll be zones. People will be ordered into zones there, so the two counter-protests will not be allowed to mix. That seems to me to be eminently sensible, and why would they not do that in Aldershot today? Mark White, there's so much to discuss, but we have to move on. Thank you, as ever. Excellent. And on the same point, by the way, I wanted to give the local Labour Party MP for Aldershot, that's Alex Baker, the opportunity to encourage those outsiders to stay away. Here's what she told us. I've been in close contact with Hampshire Police, and I urge anyone planning to attend protests to remain calm, respectful and cooperate with officers working to keep everyone safe. Having had countless conversations with residents about the broken asylum system inherited by this Labour government, I understand the strength of feeling. I have already successfully secured the closure of the asylum accommodation at Pinehurst Hillside. But you'll notice there, no order for Stand Up to Racism to stay away, despite the fact we specifically asked for that. Make of that what you will. Well, joining me now is the Conservative Councillor for Stalybridge, and that's Liam Billington. Liam, welcome to the show. I wanted to ask you about what I believe is now an extraordinary situation where a local Labour branch is effectively encouraging far-left antagonists to go into a military town to deliberately, some might say, antagonise locals. We've heard them before shouting Nazi scum off our streets. This is the military town. If you shout Nazi scum off our streets while wearing a mask, I put it to you, these people have no place being there today.
No, they absolutely don't. And, people say that everyone has a right to protest. And, I heard before that you were saying that, you see the Palestinian marches. Now, you've seen on social media, and it's been covered on GB News, if you are pro-Israeli, you are moved out of the area. The police move you on. So it's another example of two-tier policing where they're facilitating these left-wing agitators, and anyone who is on the right is basically treated as second-class citizens, and their views just do not count. But what I will say on this is the mask is slipping for Labour. Deep down, this is what they support. They support the destruction of this country. And we've seen as well locally in Greater Manchester, next door to me is Oldham Council, and the deputy leader of that council joined Stand Up to Racism in Altrincham, which is on the opposite side of Greater Manchester. Now, in her town, she does have an asylum hotel, so I think she's up for election next year, and her majority is less than 100, so she's on really dodgy grounds for taking such a strong stance on this issue.
OK, well, obviously she's not here to defend herself, so let's not get too much into that one. But on a broader point, Liam Billington, I think we are now starting to see, aren't we, clear political links between the Labour Party and Stand Up to Racism. It sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds like a great thing. Stand up to racism. Who wouldn't want to do that? Except when the mask slips, as you say. And if they're going into military towns, to do what? To specifically and deliberately antagonise, to get those headlines, those far-right thugs riot headlines. I put it to you, it would simply seem the most sensible option to keep them apart.
Yeah, absolutely. What this protest is and what they stand up for, it should be called Stand Up for Marxism, because the vast majority of this country is very tolerant. What people have had enough of is these asylum hotels whilst people are struggling, and people coming over and just getting a free ride, and that's where the frustration has come from. We are not a racist country, as we know.
OK, we have to leave it there. Liam Billington, that's the Conservative Councillor for Stalybridge. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Let's get my next guest in now to continue this debate. That's the human rights campaigner, Peter Tatchell. Peter, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Of course, you clearly protect people's individual and group collective right to protest. You've lived and breathed that for decades, but is it sometimes sensible to not allow people of such opposing views together at such a sensitive time?
Well, as you know, I defend everyone's right to protest, including the rights of people I disagree with to protest. It's a right for everyone. So when it comes to this particular situation, I think that Stand Up to Racism has every right to have a counter-protest. But I reiterate what the Labour MP said, it should be calm, peaceful and respectful. And people should not be wearing masks. There's no justification for wearing a mask. If you are a proud anti-racist, show your face. You don't need to hide it. And I think that there is a problem sometimes when both sides or either side do adopt inflammatory and intimidatory tactics. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. And this protest, the pink protest, I think by the mothers to defend the rights of women and girls, I understand that entirely. I get that. But I do think others have a right to counter-protest. But quite clearly, they are not Nazi. They are not scum. And using that kind of language would be disgraceful.
OK, Peter Tatchell, I'm glad you said that. Take a look at this clip that was sent to me by a military veteran on an asylum hotel protest. He will be at the Aldershot protest today. Look how he was treated by Stand Up to Racism. And let me know what you think about this clip. Now, Peter Tatchell shouting Nazi scum off our streets to mothers concerned about safety in a military town where veterans will be present. Their forefathers fought actual Nazis, not Nazis who say hurty things on the internet, real Nazis, the ones that murdered millions of Jews. These people are wearing masks. Their modus operandi is specifically and deliberately inflammatory. Peter Tatchell, once again, can you please condemn this grotesque behaviour?
Well, I couldn't hear the audio, but if what you say, it was shouting Nazi scum off our streets, then I don't see any evidence that anyone there was a Nazi. You know, they may have disagreeable views on asylum people, but that is not the same as Nazism. So that's a complete exaggeration, disproportionate and unnecessary. And it actually discredits the just cause of defending legitimate migrants and refugees. I think the whole problem with the campaign against the asylum hostels and hotels is really misjudged, because the protests aren't going to change anything. What's going to change things is if we allow refugees and migrants to work while their claims are being assessed, so they can pay for their own accommodation, get a job, pay tax, pay national insurance, and contribute to the economy. That's the way to go, and also mean we can keep better tabs on them, because if they're employed, we know their employers, we know how to contact them. So that's a much better approach, And I think just being hostile doesn't solve anything.
Okay, Peter Tatchell, I was agreeing with you right until the moment you said asylum seekers should be able to work, but of course that would simply roll out the red carpet to the entire world. But Peter Tatchell, sincerely, no, it would, mate, it would, and we have quite enough low-paid jobs in this country as it is. I think that's not the way to go, but look, I'm being told we have to move on. But Peter, sincerely, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you.